Hey guys, all right. Today's lesson is going to be on welding symbols. When it comes to layouts and blueprints, welding symbols has its own set of standards that conveys the type of weld, the preparation before the weld, any kind of finishing remarks that it should, how the weld should look at the very end, all done through symbols. And so it's like its own form of communication between the engineer who designs the product and the welder who builds the thing. All right. And so we have to be able to communicate with all people involved. And I'll tell you, oftentimes this is left out. Like a lot of people know how to weld. All right. Welding, just get a stack of metal. You can kind of pick it up and get through it. The things that separate people that just know how to weld with people that are considered really talented welders, it is definitely preparation. How good are you at setting up your metal before you weld? How clean are you working? But also it's being able to read symbols. All right. You're working in a welding shop. If you know how to read welding symbols and you can actually fabricate the weld that the engineer has designed for you or the person that has asked you to build this thing, if you can fabricate that according to their specifications and you understand what all those symbols mean, that's going to give you a leg up on any job. All right. A lot of welders don't know this stuff, and it's one thing that can hold them back. All right. So let's go ahead and hop in real quick. Welding symbols. You're going to have a horizontal line, and this is known as a reference line. All of your welding information is going to be placed upon this reference line. Then typically on either side of the reference line, it doesn't matter, you're going to have an arrow coming down. So this will be your arrow line. All right. And that's going to point at the joint that is to be welded. And then you'll have a tail of your welding symbol. And this tail area, this is just used for general information. If there's not a symbol for something you're trying to convey, or you just need to write some text like, hey, watch, do this, this is just for general information here. All right. Everything else that we're going to put on this reference line is very specific, both of it in its orientation and location. All right. So we have to learn how these things get laid out. Now, all welding symbols are read from left to right, regardless of the orientation of your arrow. All right. If this was my welding symbol, I would still read all this information from left to right. Okay. Also, one of the things, I'll go ahead and just lay out a simple joint right here. So let's just start with a T-joint. All right, probably the most common type of joint, other than maybe a surface or something like that. Anyway, I got a T-joint here, okay? And so I'm gonna have a welding symbol that's gonna come out like this. And let's say I'm going to do a fillet weld that is 1/4 inch. All right. So based on this welding symbol and the location of this, of my information here, I know to weld this side right here. On our reference line, any information written below the line, you're going to weld on the arrow side of the joint. Any information on above the line, you're going to weld on the other side of the joint. All right. So it's tough for you guys to see. All right. So now I have my arrow side and my other side. And if you're welding both, you'll have information on both top and bottom of that joint, of that reference line. And that lets you know what side you're going to do what on. All right, because we could have a completely different operation going on over here than we did here. All right, just depends on, it doesn't matter. It's not up to you. You're just replicating what someone has asked you to replicate. All right, so I'll lay out a few joints and we'll look at these things. Let's see, what else? T-joint, corner joint. And flat plate butt joint. Okay, so for example, right here, if I had this side right here, this would be my arrow side, and this would be my other side. That's on the other side of that joint. All right, like we just saw, this would be my arrow side, this would be my other side. This is the other side of the joint. All right, arrow, other. So this would be my arrow side. This over here is my other side. All right. Just to hammer this home, these are the kind of the 5 main joints anyway, so we'll use these a lot. All right. This is my arrow side. This is my other side, that joint right there. And if I had something right here, this is my arrow side. That is my other side. All right. So I have my arrow, I have my reference line, I have a tail, if in this case I didn't need one, but depending on what side my information's on. All right. So if I had all my information up here, all right, and I wanted a 1/2 inch weld, I have to know that that's on the other side of that joint because it's on the top of my reference line. So just what it's pointing at, there's 2 sides to every joint. We have to know if we're welding both of them or one side over the other. And the only reason they wouldn't have an arrow down here is just because you may have a busy drawing. You may have 3 or 4 parts in that drawing and you have another part laid out down here and you don't have room for that arrow. That's the only reason. All right, so it's an organizational thing to space things out as much as possible so we can clearly read the print. All right, and then of course, that way we're not hindered by saying, okay, well, I'm welding this side, so I have to have my arrow here. And then you got to move other stuff in your drawing. It just makes things confusing. So no matter what we have, whatever symbol we have, we can delineate or determine both sides of a welding joint if needed. Okay. Now let's get into some preparation. All right. So you often, when you get a print, all right, you're going to get an image that is not complete because in CAD, they don't draw in welds. All right. They depend on the welding symbol to show that. And they don't even draw in the preparation. Like if you're expected to bevel your material, they're not going to see that on the print because the final product, if you bevel it, you're going to weld that all back up anyway. And I mean, you'll be able to tell, but it doesn't look like it will. So something like this, let's say I'm just doing a butt joint. All right. This is my welding symbol. Here's my arrow. And I have that right there. All right. It's below my reference line. So I'm going to do this on the arrow side of my joint. All right. And that tells me to bevel. This would be the preparation required before you submit this, before you complete this weld. And so what this tells me is that I actually have to grind out that area. All right. I need to prepare my metal in this fashion right here before I weld it. That's what the engineer is requesting. All right. Now, you won't see this on a blueprint though. All right. When you see it, all you see is this. All right. You have to reference this to understand what you're supposed to do, how they want you to prepare the metal pre-weld. All right. So in this case, they want you to bevel it. Now, you typically do get more information here, like the angle at which that's beveled. Do you bevel all the way through, or do they only want it beveled halfway? Something like that. Like you'll get more information than just that symbol right there. But if that's all you got, you assume it's a all the way bevel, fill it back up. All right. And that's how they're going to join those 2 pieces of metal together. We can do fillets on both sides. So let's go with a T-joint. All right, you'll see this sometimes. This is my fillet symbol. All right, my fillet symbol, that's just, if you guys could see this, All right, that's just this weld all the way across. That's called a fillet weld. All right, and so you're just putting two pieces together and you're running a pass, in this case, all the way across. On my fillet symbol, my vertical line is always on the left side. All right, it's always on the left side. And I'll get into why that's the case, but we always have to have that perpendicular line on the left side right here. If I wanted to weld both sides. So typically, because I'd always have my size right there. So that's the size of this weld right here. And so if I was to actually have this weld, this is on the top, so it's the other side, I would have a little weld right here. All right, and the size of that weld would be 1/4 inch. All right, I know you guys can't see that too good because it's too small. All right, so the size of that weld is 1/4 inch. I can come down here. Now my print says do both sides 1/4 inch. All right, so now based upon this, I'm going to do both sides 1/4 inch. All right, and that's pretty much what this is right here, all the way across. You may also see sometimes something like this. Again, T, right? Pretty common. Now, if I was to look at this from this orientation right here, from the top of this weld, all right, it would look like this. All right, with this small rectangle right here being this piece that's kind of sticking up right here. So you may see a symbol that looks like this. All right, so now we're starting to build out this symbol a little further and further, right? So looking at this, my first thing right here, I have a fillet weld. It's on my arrow side. It's a 1/4 inch fillet weld. And this is called 2-on-5. All right, that means I have a 2-inch weld. This is the length. All right, and this is the pitch. 2-on-5. All right, and the way that works, let's just say that's this side right here. All right, I'm going to have a 2-inch weld, and the center of my welds are going to be spaced out every 5 inches, the center to center. All right, let's see. This is not 2-on-5, but you can see how short weld, space, short weld, space, short weld. All right, so that's kind of this type of orientation. So this weld right here would be 2 inches long, 2 inches long, 2 inches long, and then 5 inches from center to center. All right, so this is what this symbol is talking about. All right, so notice straight, my vertical line right here is always on the left. All right, my size of my weld, that's this part right here. All right, that's going to be 1/4 inch tall. And then this, if nothing's here, just go straight all the way across. If there is information here, then of course you got to lay out a little bit better. So often we just mark on our metal where we're going to start and stop, and then go from there. All right, so 1/4 inch fillet weld, 2-on-5. The pitch means it's from center to center. You may also see something like this. This is called a chain weld. So I'll go both sides. We'll call it 3/8. And I'll call this 3-on-6. All right, so again, the size of my fillet is going to be 3/8 of an inch. All right, go to my plan view or my top view. And on this case, I'm welding both sides. This is known as a chain weld, all right? The length of each weld is gonna be 3 inches, spaced out 6 inches on center, all right? And so that would look like this. Each of these welds is 3 inches long, and from center to center, it's 6 inches long, and they're just stacked right on top of each other, all right? And then the final one I want to show you guys, the final welding symbol we're going to cover today is if you see something like this. So if I see something like this, you see how they're staggered? All right, this is called a staggered intermittent weld, where the first one was a chain intermittent weld. A staggered intermittent weld would just mean like, all right, now in this case, this would still have to be a 3-inch weld. It still calls for 3 inches, and the spacing would have to be 6 inches. I don't know if my picture is a good representation, but you kind of get the point, where if we weld on this side has no weld. In the void right here, this side has the weld, all right? And a lot of that's heat control and stuff like that, so things aren't warping too much. Okay, I hope that made sense. If you need, if you have any questions or anything, obviously hit me up, and I will do my best to help out.